Hello and good afternoon, and welcome on Youth Matters with me, your host, Sakina Habib. Did you know that while campaigning for the 2016 presidential elections, Donald Trump repeatedly referred to his running mates Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton as the founders of ISIS, accusing them of creating the conditions that allowed for the rise of the terrorist organizations? ISIS, Al Qaeda, and other extremist groups wreaked havoc in Syria during the 12-year-long NATO Gulf backed regime change war, ultimately leading to the collapse of the Assad regime. Craig Murray, journalist and former British diplomat, said that there is a reason why Al Nusra and ISIS never attack Israel because they are sponsored by Israel and the CIA. So let's be conscious of who is celebrating with you. If the Zionist entity applauds your wins and extends a hand as your friendly neighbor, you may find your congratulations quickly turning into condolences. Opposing a regime should never turn into an alliance with terrorists and imperial forces in the region. Liberal Zionists are aware that Israel cannot exist without violence, destruction, and theft. Yet, they invoke liberal values and condemn Palestinian resistance as terrorism. They may criticize Netanyahu and the Likud party for their openly genocidal and violent aggression, but this does not mean they oppose the existence of the settler colonial project. They are also Zionists, after all, who prefer to use the method of ethnic cleansing by perpetuation of expulsion and land theft. Let's get more into this on today's discussion as we dig into the analysis of Syria's fall. I will be joined by two esteemed guests, Sister Sakina Datu, who is a broadcaster and a producer and a journalist, as well as Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, who is a historian as well as a political commentator and analyst. So, Sister Sakina, I would like to ask you, Western leaders are celebrating Assad's fall as an opportunity for Syrians, but remain totally silent as Israel invades and steals their land. Why do you think this is happening? And why are the Sunni Muslims, in fact, happy about this decision? What logic is in this that a country that was once ruled by a dictator is now going to be ruled by so called rebels?
The West is supporting ISIS and are happy about the fall of Syria because they are the ones who have been supporting ISIS, and the reason for this is for the benefit of Israel. They do support the expansion of Israel because the Zionist entity is there. For the interest of the Western countries. They were planted there in order to control the resources and the economic pathways, trade pathways. So it is obvious that they are happy with that. They are, although in the long run, I think they are also quite aware that ISIS aren't, these are the same throat slitting terrorists that they cannot trust in the long run, but it served their purpose in the immediate right now immediately to dispose of Bashar al-Assad, who was part of the axis of resistance and who ensured that there was for example the whatever was being sent via Iran in support to Lebanese resistance was passing through Syria. So it was in their interest. On the issue of why the Sunnis are celebrating, I think it is not Sunnis. It would be wrong to say that all Sunnis are celebrating. A lot of them are quite aware of what is the situation, and that these ISIS do not represent any religious, whether it's Sunni or Shia or anyone. However, there is a strong sectarian game that is being played in the Middle East, and there is a psychological warfare through the media that is happening, whether it is through the Arabic-speaking media, media like Al Jazeera, or the Western media. And this is because they want to confuse and create a sectarian war, because whenever they have not been able to succeed in ruling any part of the world, then they use the sectarian card to ensure that they divide the Muslims. But I do believe that in the short term, the axis of resistance has been weakened to a certain extent, but not for long. I think we will see a regrouping. Today, Sayyid Khamenei has given a talk, and he has talked about the fact that the axis of resistance will eventually come from Syria itself, because the Syrian people, even those who are rejoicing, who thought that getting rid of Bashar al-Assad was to their advantage, very very soon will find out that they are in for even bigger problem. We already see a lot of executions happening on the streets. So I think they will realize that this is not in their interest. American troops being in Syria is not in their interest, and I think the axis of resistance will be able to regroup.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, Sister Sakina. Thank you for sharing that. I would like to move on to Dr. Marcus. Dr. Marcus, do you think that does Syria have the right to defend itself? Or the more pertinent question is that does Israel have the right to invade, occupy, and annex with full impunity?
It is far too early to draw concrete conclusions as to how Syria fell. But what is abundantly clear is that Syria is dead and its corpse is being dismembered. The Syrian state, which was truly independent and sovereign, and which guaranteed and ensured the preservation and security of all of Syria's various ethnic and religious groups, has been obliterated. What is also very clear to me is that America, Turkey, and Israel conceived and initiated the offensive by the Al Qaeda affiliate HTS. Now, the motives for Washington, Ankara, and Tel Aviv for having supported the HTS offensive are somewhat different. In the case of America, the Americans sought to overstretch the Russian military, to make the Russian military fight on two fronts, namely in Ukraine and in Syria, in the hope that Russia would lose control of the situation in Syria and thus would not be able to militarily defend the Syrian state. The Americans are very well aware that since the 1960s, Syria has been Russia's eyes and ears in the Middle East and in North Africa. Now that Syria has fallen, Russian influence and power in the Middle East has been all but ejected. In regard to Turkey, the Turks are pursuing a greater Turkey. Thus, we see the Turkish military has invaded again northern Syria and is expanding the territory of northern Syria, which it controls, which includes Aleppo, an ancient Christian center. Also, the Turks seek to deliver a lethal blow to the Kurds of northern Syria. And in the case of Israel, the Israelis are pursuing a greater Israel. Hence, they have invaded southern Syria and have captured Quneitra and adjacent areas. And as I talk, the Israeli military is very close to the southern outskirts of Damascus. On top of that, the Israelis, by having supported the Al Qaeda offensive in Syria, they sought to deliver a serious blow to Iran and to Hezbollah. The Israelis understand that by destroying the Syrian state, that would immensely weaken both Iran and Hezbollah. So that is why the Israelis took part in the Al Qaeda offensive. One final observation. In the United Kingdom, HTS is a proscribed organization. because it is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, and Al-Qaeda is prescribed in the United Kingdom. So, in light of that, I have a question to ask. Why is it that the British police have not arrested or even knocked on the doors of politicians and mainstream journalists who are rejoicing in the victory of HTS and who are referring to HTS terrorists as, and I quote, rebels? Suffice to say, there is a reason why Britain, for centuries now, has been referred to by people throughout the world as perfidious Albion.
And also, don't you think that the timing of these attacks is quite suspicious and fishy? Like, why now? Why are all these attacks taking place in Syria right now? Where were these rebels when, Gaza was being annihilated for the past entire year? Dr. Marcus, can I ask you this? Why do you think this is happening now?
The West has, for many decades now, enjoyed an informal strategic partnership with religious fanatics, with religious terrorists. This relationship first manifested itself during the 1980s, when the West was supporting the Mujahideen, which of course included the likes of Osama bin Laden, against the Soviet army. Then the Americans facilitated the arrival of Mujahideen warriors, including bin Laden, to Bosnia to fight against the Bosnian Serbs, because the Bosnian Muslim authorities, the Bosnian Muslim army, were being backed by the West. The West then supported Al-Qaeda in Libya in 2011 to overthrow the government of Libya, to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. And then, starting at the end of 2011, the West again supported religious extremists in Syria, or I should say, facilitated the arrival in Syria of tens of thousands of foreign fighters to overthrow the Syrian government. So, in regard to the likes of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, these two groups care nothing about Syria or Libya or Iraq. They only care about pursuing their depraved, vile, wicked, evil ideology. These extremists, these terrorists, have nothing to do with true Islam. Again, they have nothing to do with true Islam. In Syria, the old Syria, which is now dead, mosques and churches stood side by side with one another in peace and in harmony. That was true Islam, and that was also true Christianity. Compare and contrast Christianity in Syria to Christianity in the West, which only exists on paper. And I should also add, I strongly believe that that piece of paper has long ago been torn to shreds. The West abandoned Christianity decades ago. So you ask me, Sakina, about those terrorist groups in Syria, why they never came to the aid of Palestine, because they are in a strategic partnership with America. They are in a strategic partnership with Turkey, and they are in a strategic partnership with Israel, a strategic partnership which exists unofficially. Where is Al-Qaeda and ISIS today when the Israeli military have invaded southern Damascus? Where is Al-Qaeda and ISIS today when the Israeli military have all but destroyed the Syrian military infrastructure? They are nowhere to be seen because Al Qaeda and ISIS and Israel are in cahoots with each other. And of course, Western mainstream media is portraying the Israeli invasion, not incursion, invasion of Syria as a defense against Al Qaeda and ISIS. So that is why they have to destroy the Syrian military infrastructure to ensure that the Syrian military infrastructure doesn't fall into the hands of Al Qaeda and ISIS. Well, of course, that is the lie which Western mainstream media will project to the world. The reality is that Al Qaeda and ISIS are allowing the Israeli military to invade Syria, are allowing the Israeli military to destroy the Syrian military infrastructure because that is the agreement. Israel is rejoicing at the destruction of the Syrian state, but Israel is also fearful that one day there could be a Syrian nationalist revolution in Syria and Al Qaeda and ISIS could be expelled. So the Israelis are looking to destroy here and now the Syrian military to ensure that never again can Syria pose a threat to Israel, and never again can Syria support Hezbollah and Palestine.
Absolutely. Yes, you have really explained that and put it out very well, Dr. Marcus. So, Sister Sakira, as from the points that I picked from Dr. Marcus's comments, let's take a look at also Iran over here. Do you think that Iran betrayed Syria? Because this is an important clarification that is needed. Do you think that Iran did it conspire for Syria's downfall with Russia and Turkey?
Definitely not. I think Iran has been one of the biggest supporters of Syria, and in turn, Syria also was supporting the axis of resistance, which includes Iran. So, what has really happened, I think, in the past few years was that both Russia and Syria were warning Bashar al-Assad that there were, problems within his army. The people were very dissatisfied. A lot of times, Iran said to them, for example, that there was a lot of high level of corruption within the army and it needed reform. And I believe that Russia did the same. However, I think Bashar al-Assad lately was courting more of the Gulf countries because they had promised him, first of all, that he would be readmitted into the Arab League, which they did, but also promised him that because of their connections with the US, that they would ensure that the sanctions are lifted in Syria, which was one of the crippling things for the Syrian economy. And Bashar al-Assad, with his years of resistance, should have known better that you can never ever trust anything to do with the US. So what they ended up doing was backstabbing him. Now, in terms of the connection with Iran used to have a strong army, Iranian army, that was based in Aleppo, which was one of the biggest deterrent because the Syrian army by itself wasn't strong enough, wasn't motivated enough. And during the past years, like I said, the more he started courting the Arab countries, they were asking him to distance himself with Iran for their support. And one of the things he ended up doing was trying to reform his army, to change a system of army from conscription into a modern army. And in that process, he asked Iranians forces to leave. Now, he left Aleppo very vulnerable after that. And even once the incursion started, Iranians have made it very clear, and Professor Muhammad Marandi has spoken about this openly, that Iran was still ready the army was ready to go and support, but it was Syrians themselves that did not want the support. The army, its own army, wasn't ready to fight. Now, Iran cannot go and defend a country that itself doesn't want to be defended, because then that would become occupation, just like Turkey has occupied now. So Iran has not by any way backstabbed. It was the internal problems. Assad himself, took, I think in the last day, he changed his mind 3 to 4 times, according to Iranian intelligence, whether he wanted support or not. And also, his army literally just let the others walk in, and they were not ready to fight. In that case, really, you cannot blame either Russia or Iran. They were there to support, but their support wasn't asked for.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you on this point. In fact, Iran, as you said, it did consider, in light of the achievements of the resistance axis in the past year, that it was strategically harmful to be dragged into a sectarian war. And the war remains with the primary enemy itself, because Syria has been unstable for the longest time, and with the seeping corruption and lack of fortified institutions, it was only a matter of when this would happen. And Dr. Marcus, if you remember, according to late Palestinian activist Nizar Banat, he had warned 4 years ago that if the Syrian government falls, Gaza and its resistance will become even more vulnerable with the ongoing blockade. Do you think, is his statement supporting today's situation, and how so?
Mission accomplished. That's one of the key reasons as to why the West initiated the terrorist campaign against Syria in 2011. Not only to deprive Russia in Syria of its eyes and ears, but also to strike a deadly blow against Palestine. Now, I don't have any doubt that even with the fall of Syria, the destruction of the Syrian state, I have no doubt that the Palestinian people will continue to resist Israeli aggression. But now that the Syrian state has been obliterated, clearly Palestine is in very serious trouble. I would also add this. Iran's situation now is also somewhat precarious, because with the passing of the Syrian state, Iran has lost one of its key friends and allies, not just in the Middle East, but in the world. So what can Iran do now? Well, whilst Iran and Russia have a strategic partnership with each other, I strongly suspect that Tehran and Moscow will look to collaborate with one another even more closely now, because that would add even more strength and defense to Iran, but it would also allow Russia to have some sort of leverage in the Middle East, in West Asia in general. But as I said at the beginning of this discussion, for all intents and purposes, Russia's eyes and ears in the Middle East has been all but destroyed now. So the West has achieved what it sought after 13 years. So has Turkey. I hear what Sakina says about Erdogan, but let us be mindful that apart from Azerbaijan, all of the other neighbours of Turkey would say it doesn't matter who's in charge of Turkey. Turkey is historically a very aggressive and a very problematic country. So Turkey has achieved what it wanted. It will annex more foreign lands, as it has done in Cyprus, as it will do now in Syria. And of course, the Israelis will pursue the Greater Israel project, and also they have a more or less, maybe a complete free hand now to terrorize even further the Palestinian civilian population of Gaza. And I believe today, more than ever before, the Israelis will achieve their objective in Gaza. They will remove, either entirely or largely speaking, the Palestinian inhabitants of that part of Palestine. They will annex that part of Palestine. Who is going to stop Israel now? Who can stop them now? When you have America backing you, along with all the other treacherous Arab states, for example, Jordan and Saudi Arabia, seriously speaking, honestly speaking, who is going to stop Israel from achieving what it wants? Even before the overthrow of Syria, there was nothing that was going to stop Israel. Now that Syria has been destroyed, the path is clear for Israel to do whatever it wants.
Thank you very much, Dr.
I'm sorry to say that, but I think we have to be brutally realistic.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. We have to shed light on the truth, and we need to make our statements very factual and on the right side. Yeah. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning on today's program, and I would like to extend my gratitude towards our esteemed speakers, Dr. Marcus and Sister Sakina Datu, for having shared their insights and commentary on the analysis of Syria's fall. And inshallah, we'll be catching you in the upcoming episodes. This is your host, Sakina Habib, signing off. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.